At this point in the hammerhead process, you should be just about done on the lathe, and so you've turned down the diameters, you've done your threading, you've done your grooving, your chamfers. Now you have to bring this part over to the milling machine, because there's one operation we have to do over there, which is this tapped and countersunk hole, or counterbored hole. So in order to accomplish that, we take a look at our print, and basically we can see that this hole is going to be centered along our x-axis on the milling machine, and also on our y-axis, basically right in the middle of this part. If I were to drill straight down right there, it'd be going right into the middle of the part. As far as what that hole is going to look like, well, there's a couple different operations that we have to accomplish. So first of all, it's a tapped hole, and it tells us right here that it's a 3/16 tap, that we want 5/8 of an inch deep. In order to accomplish that, we use a tap drill of 5/16 first. So our first step is going to be a spot drill, just to give ourselves a place to start. Then we're going to go ahead and move to our 5/16 drill right there. We're going to go 3/4 of an inch deep, because that's going to give us a little bit of room for our tap to go, to allow us to get a full 5/8 deep threads when we get to that point. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to drill our hole 5/16 deep, or 5/16 drill, 3/4 inch deep. Then we're going to counterbore it. And so in order to counterbore it, it tells you right here we have a 438 thousandths diameter counterbore that's going to go 1/16 of an inch deep. And if you look on our print, you can see that there's a shallow counterbore. And all that's going to do is it's going to accept this diameter on the hammerhead. And we'll notice that's a 425 thousandth diameter. And so it should end up going right into that counterbore, so that we don't see these threads in the end, and it kind of seats a little bit further into the part. So we need our we need a spot drill, we need our 5/16 drill. Then we're going to counterbore using this 7/16 M mill, because 438 equates to a 7/16 M mill. We could use a counterbore, but we're going to go ahead and use what we have. And then we're going to need a 5/16 18 tap, okay, as noted right on the side right here. So those are the tools that we're going to need to accomplish the job, and so I'm going to set the machine up and show you that process. Okay, so when you guys go to set this up, I want you to notice how high I have it in the vise. So you'll notice I'm only using one parallel. I have it centered up on the piece, and then the parallel height is short enough to allow me to grab onto the whole diameter of the part. If you go too tall with the parallel, it's going to end up squeezing your part right out of the vise. So it's just short enough to allow me to grab the diameter with the vise, and it's not too short that I have the whole thing buried in here. Now the thing to note with this, once I get started with this, you have to complete this all pretty much in one setup. If I go and I start my hole and I only get the hole drilled, and then I take it back out and I want to go do the counterbore, it becomes a lot harder to make sure that I put the part back in there at the proper orientation so that the hole is straight back up and down. So I want to do this entire process in one setup from start to finish. And so this is what it's going to look like. First thing is I need to edge find this. So you're used to edge finding to locate just an edge. And what we want to do on this is we want to find the center. And so you can do that by edge finding this edge, moving it over the radius of the edge finder, zeroing it back out, and then going to the location of the center. Or what you can do is just edge find both edges, divide the number by 2, and go right to the middle, which is what I'm going to show you right now, because the only place we care about right now is the middle of the part. So I'm going to go ahead and engage my edge finder. Okay, so I'm going to engage right on the end, so I bury my edge finder far enough in there so that I'll be touching the ends of where my threads should be. Okay, and so I bring it over, I touch it off. Okay, offset on me, you can hear it. I'm going to go ahead and reset my X0. I'm going to go ahead and zero out X. Now, all I'm going to do is lift up my edge finder, and instead of what you're used to, I'm going to go ahead and just move it all the way over to the other side. Bring my edge finder back down, and I'm going to touch it off on this side. Okay, and so what I want to show you is, if you're a little bit off on the length, basically I look over here and my X is listed at 2.263. That's how it was, that's how far it is from end to end of that part. And so now I just need to do a little math, and I figure out that 2.263 divided by 2 is 1.131. And so if I just go to that number on my digital readout, you're going to see that it goes right to the middle of the part. And so if I look at my readout, I see that it's 1.131 on X. Okay, and when I brought it there, it brings me exactly halfway. Now I'm going to do the exact same process for Y. And so I'm going to bring it off. Now you'll notice you can't access the side of your part in Y, so I'm actually going to edge find in between the two vice jaws, but I'm going to do the exact same process. So I bring my edge finder down, I'm going to bump it off the back jaw. I zero out Y, and then I bump it off the front jaw. That number that it just gave me is 352 on my digital readout for Y. You can see that right up here. And I'm going to divide that by 2 and go right to the middle. And now you can see that I'm right at the middle, and my digital readout is the divided number. When I figured out my overall length, my divided by 2 is 1.131, and my overall width, or Y, divided by 2 is 176. And so once I go to those numbers, basically that becomes my new 0, 0, and that's the very center of the part. My first tool is my spot drill, so all I'm going to do is go ahead and just make a small spot for this to sit into, for my drill bit to start in. So I just go ahead, not super critical, maybe about 100 thousandths deep or so, because we're about to drill the hole anyway. So that's my spot. So now I have my 5/16 drill bit in there, and my print tells me I have to drill 3/4 of an inch deep. So I put my drill bit in, and then what I did was I visually positioned it to right at the top of the part. And you're going to have to do this visually because now you have a little spot drill there, so you can't actually touch it off on the top because it'll sink below the surface. So you'll see I just have the tip of the drill bit visually referenced off the top plane of that part. Then what I did was I set my stop up here. Okay, so I have this stop that once I have my drill bit referenced off the top of the part, okay, I can set this distance right here for this stop, and you'll notice I have my caliper set to 750 thousandths, and I make sure that this distance is 3/4 of an inch. That's going to be the depth of my hole. And so I'm pretty much set up. I'm right over my spot drill, and I'm going to go ahead, turn the machine on, make sure you calculate your RPM, and then I'm going to drill until I hit that stop. You can use just a small little drop of cutting fluid to help lubricate the process, and then you're going to use your quill handle to go until you hit the stop. Back drilling along the way. Say I'm close to halfway there. And you can't go too far past because you don't have a ton of material, and you have about 100 thousandths of meat left over at the bottom of this hole. So if you blow the 3/4, you might drill a hole all the way through your part. So I just hit my stop right there. I'm going to stop this drill bit and switch out to my counter. So now I'm ready to counter bore. I'm going to go ahead and just give myself a little drop of oil again. Turn my machine on. Now I'm going to use my quill to touch off, but then I'm going to lock it in place and use my Z-axis in order to zero it out and take my depth of cut, which is 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it up and touch it off while it's running. Okay, just started to touch right there. Okay, now I'm going to zero out my Z-axis. You know how to do that. And then 1/16 happens to be 62.5 thousandths. So I'm going to rotate this just a little over half of one turn on the Z-axis hand wheel to 62. So I'm at 30, 40, 50, 62, and I even go halfway between for 62.5. And that's it. That's as deep as you want this counter bore to be. Okay, so now you're ready to tap this part, and one mistake that I had earlier is that I said it was a 5/16 tap, but that doesn't make sense because I used a 5/16 drill. So what we actually want is what the print specifies is a 3/16 tap. If you use a 5/16 tap right here, it'll just go into the hole and won't actually make any threads. So before I get started, I have it installed in my chuck. I'm going to put a little bit of cutting fluid on the tap. Just a couple of drops, doesn't have to be excessive. Okay, and then I'm going to put the machine into neutral. And so if you're not sure what I'm talking about there, I have my gear selector switch right up here. Okay, and all I'm going to do is push it in and pop it down, and it goes about halfway and locks in. Don't go all the way. That's low gear. It makes the chuck very hard to turn by hand, but what neutral does for me right there in the middle position is now I can spin this chuck very freely by hand, which is going to help me out because I'm going to tap this hole by hand, just using the machine as an alignment mechanism. So I'm going to advance my quill down, plug it in, okay, just kind of by hand, and then I'm going to go ahead and start to turn my chuck by hand. You'll feel it start to bind up, and just like with anything else, we want to break the chip, and then you're going to keep advancing by hand. If it gets hard to do, there's a little trick. You can actually use your chuck key as a little wrench. One thing to make sure of is that your quill is unlocked right here, and also that you're not hitting your stop. So I've got plenty of room before I hit my stop. I can back that off a little bit. But I'm just going to keep advancing this, okay, a couple turns at a time. So I go in a turn, I break my chip. I go in and break my chip. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going to here until I bottom out. And once I hit the bottom of the hole, you'll be able to tell it'll stop on you. If you keep forcing it at this point, you will break the tap off. So kind of feel the tap out. Once it hits the bottom, it's not like breaking the chip anymore. It's a hard stop. At this point, you're just going to go ahead and back the whole thing out. And then as it gets towards the top, you can just pull it out with the quill. Okay, and I'll blow out the hole and show you what the completed threads look like. Okay, if you can see right into there, you see a nice counter bore. Okay, you see my drill hole, you see my nice counter bore, and then you see threads that go almost clear down to the bottom.